Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning,
So,
everybody.
We're doing what we women do best. We manage on the fly. So I want to, before I sit down, I really want to thank Steve Rusckowski for joining us today. He is the CEO of Quest Diagnostics, leading that huge organization through a massive transformation that started in 2012. So we're going to sit down and we're going to start with Steve giving us a little bit about his background, what led him to be able to tackle such a huge undertaking, what it's been like, and so we'll start with his background and then we'll get into a bunch of questions. So everybody keep your questions flowing, and at the end we'll get to a good Q&A.
Thanks, Ruth. Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
So Steve, let's hear a bit about your background.
Sure,
you know, how did life lead you to this massive transformation?
Yeah. So you're never quite certain what life is going to bring you. So unfortunately, in front of you, after a long journey, and I never thought in a million years I'd be presenting or talking to a group like you back years ago. So a little bit about my journey. Actually, a little on the personal side. I live here in New York City, so I didn't have a long commute, Ruth. Yeah, time to move out of Connecticut and move to New York City.
Yes, I guess so.
So I live here in the Upper East Side, so easy drive to come down. And as you know, I went to the Sloan School and I graduated in '84. And actually, two of my children went to the Sloan School. I've got two other Sloan School grads. My daughter graduated on, I can't remember what year, but she's
they can tell you.
Lauren, anybody know Lauren Rusckowski? Lauren Dupree? Lauren's my daughter, yeah. She's now the vice president of HR at Takeda up in the Boston area. Okay, she was at Biogen and just changed jobs. And my son Joe Rusckowski, anybody know Joe? No, Joe is at New Balance up in the Boston area. He's leading up their digital strategy. So we have a little bit of a family connection with MIT Sloan. So as I mentioned, I graduated in '84, and I have been at my career for about 40 years. It's hard to believe. One day you wake up and you realize you're that older person in front of the room talking about what you've done. Okay? That would be me. Okay, that would be me. So I really think about my career in four, chapters. I'll be brief. First of all, I have an engineering background. I started my career at Procter & Gamble, but actually on the operations side. People think about brand management, P&G in Cincinnati, but it was on the operations management side. And really, I became quickly no longer an engineer, but in management. So I realized I need to go back to school and learn everything I didn't learn as an engineer, and I did that at the Sloan School. And then fortunately, when I left Sloan, I started joined a cool company by the name of Hewlett-Packard. And this is in 1984, okay? So you probably don't think Hewlett-Packard is the cool company now, but in 1984, it was the cool company, okay? 1984, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard were still part of the company, so we call them Bill and Dave. About $3 billion in sales, headquartered in Palo Alto. Man, if anybody go to Stanford here? So the engineering buildings are Hewlett and Packard, so really considered to be the early pioneers of Silicon Valley. And we did everything cool. We had open offices back then in '84. We wore jeans on Friday.
Perish the thought.
Running with scissors in the halls, all sorts of wild things. It was a company built by engineers for engineers, essentially. But it's really where I started my career, and I joined the medical business. And actually, the medical business was in the Boston area. And fortunately, I joined the medical business, but because it's been my career ever since, med tech. And the reason why it was in the Boston area is actually Hewlett-Packard did an acquisition in 1961, bought a company by the name of the Sanborn Company, because Bill Hewlett's father was a physician, and he wanted to apply electronics to medicine. And actually, Bill Hewlett is an MIT grad. He got his master's from MIT. So I started my career as a financial analyst, and fortunately, I became the last leader of that business. I became the vice president and general manager of that business in '99. And we spun off the HP businesses, the original HP business, to create a company by the name of Agilent Technologies, and I ran the healthcare business there. And then, I won't bore you with all the details, but 99, 2000, it was the tech boom and the tech bust. And anything that wasn't growing 15 to 20% was slow growth. Carly Fiorina was coming into HP, so it was a transition, if you remember those times. And so I actually represented selling the business to whatever made sense, and at that time was Philips. So I sold it to Philips. And so the third chapter of my life is I worked for a Dutch company. Okay, worked for a Dutch company, and that is quite different than working for a Silicon Valley cool company, right? And I learned a tremendous amount, and I never regret, and I actually have tremendous respect for that company and what I learned there. But I actually spent more time than I thought, about 12 years there. And then I was finally the CEO of the healthcare business at Philips. And so that was an interesting chapter of my life, based in Amsterdam. So a lot of experience globally, a lot of experience dealing with different cultures, a lot of experience working within a European culture. And then finally, I joined from the outside, become the CEO of Quest Diagnostics about 7.5 years ago. So really 4 chapters. This P&G experience, this Hewlett-Packard experience, the Philips experience, and then my time here at Quest. So 40 years. So Ruth, a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, talk to us, but before we go on to what it was like when you took over, tell us a little bit about what you drew on the most in entering the CEO role.
Yeah, I would say, throughout that period of time, 40 years, what I drew on the most is the ability to manage people and lead. So I was fortunate enough in my career, I managed all different levels of management, all different levels. My first job out of college, I was 21, believe it or not. At P&G, they would take 21-year-old engineers. They say you're in the management track. And my first job was I had a crew of 25 tradespeople managing a chemical process 24/7, union shop.
Oh, wow.
Needless to say, that was a maturing experience. So I managed, and my next job at P&G, we rotated, was a production supervisor job, but right on the factory floor. So I learned quickly how to manage people. And then eventually I got into med tech. I was in finance. I managed people in finance. I eventually ran different organizations, so all different levels, and also the ability to manage within different cultures. As I mentioned, I worked at Procter & Gamble. I worked at HP. I worked at a Dutch company, and then I'm working here at Quest Diagnostics. So the ability to be able to navigate and work and be successful in different cultures. So joining Quest Diagnostics, clearly the ability to lead and manage a diverse workforce was a real important skill to draw on.
So I think one of the great things that Steve has done within Quest is a huge charge around diversity, and we're going to get to that. And I think that relates so closely to being able to manage all sorts of cultures and all levels. But to start, you inherited Quest where there was a mandate from the board to replace the CEO.
Yep.
You had an activist investor, which we all love talking about and hearing about. How did you manage the initial plan? What was the plan? And you were an outsider.
Yeah. It was so it was quite an experience. So I had a big job. I was running Philips Healthcare, based in Amsterdam, $12 billion company, 30,000 people, complicated, half the business in the United States, half the business outside of the United States. So I was running around a lot. Okay, a lot going on. So that was in 2011, and I heard about the opportunity at Quest in the Wall Street Journal. I had landed back in the US and reading through the journal and said, they're making a change with the CEO at Quest Diagnostics, and this is kind of interesting. So maybe I should be interested because I was always intrigued about this portion of healthcare, diagnostics. And so lo and behold, shortly thereafter, I did get a call, and they put me on the list. And when you come in from the outside, it was an interesting situation to give you a little bit of perspective. I never set foot in any of the facility at Quest Diagnostics. I never met any management member, including the CEO. Wow. I met with board members privately in offices here in New York City or airport lounges and wherever we can meet. Early April, they offered me the job. We came to terms in a couple weeks. I was still managing Philips Healthcare. And then, it's material information. We can't really decide on it because it was material to Philips and material to Quest. And so then I had to work through a transition plan with Philips. And we announced it in mid-April, and they wanted me to start on May 1st. Because the former CEO wanted to leave or demanded that he would be leaving on May 1st. Wow. So I had a pretty quick transition out and a quick transition in. So went to Amsterdam that last week in April. Had a nice going away at the Reich Museum in front of Night Watch, right? It was nice. I came back to Boston, had my drug test by Quest Diagnostics. I passed. Okay. This is a true story. So I get literally a call. I'm in Amsterdam. I get a call from the head of HR. Needless to say, he's not there anymore. Says, Steve, you need to have your drug test. It was Friday afternoon. I'm in Amsterdam. I go, you got to be kidding me. You're telling me this now? I'm sitting in Amsterdam, and you tell me I got to get a drug test. Okay. And I said, okay, fine. He goes, go to one of our PSEs. I go, Dave, what is a PSE? It's a patient service center. So long story short, I navigated it. I showed up at a PSC in Andover, Massachusetts, where I have a home. And I did the draw, and after everything was complete, I said to the phlebotomist, how do they treat you here? Do you like it here? I said, yeah, I do. And she's looking at me suspiciously. And she goes, why do you ask? I said, well, tomorrow morning I'm your CEO. So it was fun. So literally that night I flew to to New Jersey, stayed at the Short Hills Hilton. Next morning I knock on the door. My first employee was my admin assistant at that time. And I'm now the CEO of Quest Diagnostics with 50,000 people expecting I'm going to say something that made sense. Okay? There was no board, there was no transition plan. It was not, frankly, handled really smoothly. So I stepped in and had to quickly figure out what the plan is. And obviously I had a perspective. You want to get a job like this unless you had a perspective with the board. But I needed to ground it in reality. So I told the board and told my employees that we're going to take some time. I'm going to go out and do some old HP MBWA, management by wandering around, okay, flying around, talk to customers, talk to my employees, talk to my leadership team, talk to the board, talk to investors. Needless to say, there was a few activists that wanted to meet me ASAP, and I got a funny story about that, about networking. And so I did that, and I said, I'm going to come back with a plan in the fall, and we're going to launch the new plan externally and internally for Quest Diagnostics, and then I'll lay out how we're going to get there. So we, in the fall of 2012, launched what we call our new Quest, and we had a first ever investor day, which is interesting, a first ever investor day. And then secondly is we launched it as the transformation effort inside of Quest. So that's where it all began, okay? But it was interesting that was my introduction, and it took about 5 to 6 months to get through what we needed to do and get people aligned around that.
And then name those buckets of work, because I think it's interesting how you sort of maniacally, you had to restructure almost the whole company.
Lots.
You had to take quite a chunk out. I think the 15% into management levels.
Team, yeah.
So how did you take that journey? That's massive change.
Yeah, so you come in with a mandate. You come in from the outside. You have activism, expecting change. Otherwise, we wouldn't have brought you in. And so therefore, you need to make change. You need to make change quickly. Fortunately, what I inherited was an organization that was craving for change. When I got around and talked to people, they said, let's just pull the Band-Aid off. Time to move on. Okay, time to move on. For whatever reason, they felt change was necessary. So quickly, we needed to develop, okay, where are we going? Okay, what's the vision? I find in leading any large organization, it's quite important to say, what's the big picture? Where are we going? What's the ambition for this company? And fortunately, in our space in healthcare, we got a lot to be happy about, a lot to be proud about. We're in the business of taking care of people all over the world. What we do is essential to healthcare. Quest Diagnostics, 2% of cost, 70% of healthcare decision making. Yes, we run the world's largest laboratory, but frankly, from a longer term perspective, that's not the business we're in. We're in the business of diagnostic information services. More and more of the content is in information and services, and that's why I joined the company. I didn't join the company to run a medical lab. I joined the company to make a contribution to healthcare, and that was the broader ambition. We're in the business of empowering better health with diagnostic insight. So I got people rallied around a broader vision, okay, a broader mission. And then with that, okay, how we're going to get there. And I laid out 5 points. Some of them are more hygiene-oriented, returning confidence with our shareholders of how we would spend our cash. But some are very specific to what we're going to do for growth and what we're going to do around improving our productivity. And once we established that plan, we needed a different organizational structure. We needed different management capabilities. We understood we needed different processes of how we lead the company. We needed a different culture. And so that was all part of the change management. And so over this period of time, I would bring teams of people together. Could not just be my plan. It'd have to be more of a building of a shared plan within reason, but I had to move quick. And so part of that, at the same time, I had to get more productive. So you mentioned taking out 15% of leadership. We had the wrong structure, and so we restructured, put in the right structure to manage what we needed to do going forward. And as part of that, I found in some of the early analytics is we had 10 management layers between myself and doing real work, okay? So I said, way too many layers. We got to take out 3 management layers. The longest pull will be 7 layers. And then second, we have span of control of around 1 to 10. We needed 1 to 12. So we took out 15% of the management team broadly, okay, throughout the company. It was about 600 people, so it was not insignificant. And we reorganized, and I did it at the top. So when I came in, and after 6 months, we changed out about 70% of my leadership team.
Wow.
Okay, so it was a lot of change.
Now, did that all get structured and operationalized internally? Did you have external folks coming in to help manage through this?
I would say a little bit. I'm a practitioner. I've used all the management consulting firms. Periodically we'll get some advice and we'll use it. When I came in, we had one there, a good one, one of the names you'd recognize. They were doing the Operational Excellence Program, and frankly, I believe that has to be part of your DNA. So we built up that capability quickly, and they left. I knew an expert related to organizational design that I'd worked with in the past, so I brought him in to help us with that. What's the right structure? How do we get people aligned around it? He has a process. We took 3 days with 200 people in a room to kind of redesign the company collectively. So I brought some selective experts in, but I did it quickly. But I'm not a big believer in bringing big management consultants in and having them do what we should do as management. I'm a big believer as management needs to build up the muscle to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess, jumping off of that, you always in these situations find really fabulous things like, oh my God, I didn't realize that, how wonderful is this? And then you have some unintended consequences or things that happen that, are a bit of a surprise.
Right.
Can you talk to us about both those?
Sure. The good thing is when I walked in, I wasn't quite sure what the culture is. I was, okay? And when I talked to my management team about success, I think it's really important that you join an organization that has a culture that is good for you, okay, that you can work within the culture. So the pleasant surprise that I found when I joined Quest Diagnostics, it was a culture that was very familiar to me and comfortable, okay? And then as part of that, as I mentioned earlier, I found this incredible appetite and willingness and engagement around the ability to change. Now, they asked for it, but they didn't like it once they got into it, okay? But still there was this appetite. So that was a pleasant surprise.
That is
a real pleasant surprise. On the other side of the coin, what I found out is there was a lot of change necessary. And so the road to progress was further than I thought. A lot of things had not been organized in the right way from my perspective. There was some foundational capabilities that had to be built. So a lot more work than I ever realized from the outside. Yeah.
So in that you changed your direct reports, your leadership team by 70%.
Yep.
How was that journey? How did you decide what institutional knowledge you needed to keep? And how to bring in new?
Yeah, so it started with what we're going to do, strategy. What's the vision for the company, what we're trying to accomplish. 5 strategies to get there. We had 1 around growth. We still have 1 around operational excellence. And 3 really, I call it more foundational around, how do we do this with the best people on the planet to run the company, what we do with our employees, our shareholders' cash. And in that regard, I needed a different structure, okay? And a lot of people in the company did not understand how to run within that structure. And it's a multi-dimensional organizational structure, that many of you are familiar with. It wasn't there at Quest. So we organized with a structure that we had very strong functions because I had to make change quickly. And so we really hardwired functions in a bigger, better way than ever before. Okay, so it wasn't optional that we had to do things one way throughout the company, and therefore we needed to hardwire that in a big way. Second is a company did not have a product organization, a business organization. So we created a product organization, which we call clinical franchises. So that was very different of how we bring our solutions to the marketplace in a professional way. I mean, a lot of our portfolio are designed by MD PhDs. It is really rocket science, but we weren't productizing and commercializing it in a professional way. So we had to build that capability. And then finally, healthcare is very local. We're predominantly a U.S. company, and in the United States, how healthcare is organized in Boston is entirely different than what happens in California or in Florida. So it's quite different. So we had to bring in a different structure, and then with that different structure, clearly we needed to have different capabilities. And also, I sized the organization as quickly as I could, as far as my management team, and quickly worked through that we need to have a transition. And then I sized up what type of people we needed, and I needed to have people in chairs quickly. And so I hired the majority of those people within 6 months. So wow. I did a lot of work to get the best people I could find.
That was incredible. I mean, I'd like to pivot on to the conversation around diversity then. So with all that was going on, what's fascinating about the company, and you've got some great stats I want you to share with the group, you were able to maintain a dedication, and it all came from you around how do I ensure that the leadership team, the management team, reflects my larger organization and reflects my customers. So you were pretty passionate about it. It wasn't a delegated effort. Right. And from doing your own recruiting to getting it just into the DNA, I think that's an interesting story. Because often when you go through massive change, you put idealistic things a little bit, like I call it kick to the curb a bit while you get going. But what was fascinating to me in our discussion was you did all of this change, and yet you have an incredibly diverse management team. Right. And so how did that get accomplished? Because you made it look very easy, and you hear from lots of people how hard it is to find the right talent. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it has to start at the top. Yeah. So from day one, I'm a big believer that our management team has to reflect the workforce we have, and also reflect the people we sell to.
Maybe give some of the stats.
Yeah, I will. So interesting enough, this is not an unfamiliar room to me. 72% of my workforce are women. 72%. We employ about 50,000 people. Okay, so 50,000 people. In some categories, the vast majority are women. So if you are a phlebotomist, 12,000 phlebotomists, the majority are women. If you go into our laboratories, the majority of our med techs are women. Okay, so we have very, female-oriented workforce. And when I joined, 2 of my board members were women out of 10. Okay, and we had a few, 2 women on the senior management team. Okay, so we started there. But I could tell you back in 2012, if you look at the percentage of women as you went up the ranks, it dropped off pretty quickly, right? Dropped off pretty quickly. And so actually today, I'm proud to say that 55% of our supervisors and managers are women. So the majority are women. 50% of my senior management team, so my senior vice presidents and above, there's about 10 of us in our senior management team, are women. I just lost an African-American gentleman that went to a great job. I recruited him from the outside, and I brought in a Hispanic gentleman that came out of Europe to lead my commercial organization. So the top is diverse, and then also our board had to reflect the people that we manage and the market we sell to. And so now we have 4 women on our board out of 8 independent directors. I'm the 9th. Okay, so we're really focused on that, and we're continually advancing the board. So it started by me believing in this concept that it had to reflect who we're managing, and then second is who we're selling to. Now in healthcare, we have an advantage. Okay, in healthcare, the healthcare industry, by and large, is becoming much more diverse. Half the people, greater than half the people graduating from medical school are women. Many of our customers, nurses are predominantly women. So we have a very big advantage in that healthcare services in general is a diverse workforce. The other interesting stat for us is 50% of my workforce actually are people of color too. So if you go through the math, and I know you guys are good at math, you graduated from MIT, right? You never would be sitting here unless you did, right? So 70% women, 50% of color. Roughly 15% of our workforce are white males. Never mind old white males, right? Okay, so it's an unusual workforce, unusual workforce. So that was important to me and important to our board. And so when we made hiring decisions, we've always considered how we're building it. And frankly, it wasn't about the numbers. And to be honest with you, I don't look at the numbers that often. I'm aware, okay? But more important to me is that we're finding the best talent. And in my view, you have to have a diverse workforce to have the best team, okay? And so to have the best team to accomplish this ambitious set of goals that I lay out, we needed to look broadly, and looking broadly was important to us. So finding the best people on the planet was what drove our decisions.
And being a strong leader, when Steve and I were speaking, he was telling me about, well, I worked my network. I reached out to people. And so talk a little bit about that. I mean, obviously you've been a very successful leader, so it was easy to pull people.
Yeah, so as you've been around for 40 years, you get to know people. I was talking to Judy earlier. You kind of start to bump into people. And it's important because, healthcare is pretty small. I mean, when you start to meet people that are running hospital systems and pharmaceutical companies, you get to know people. So when I started thinking about, with the board, the composition of the board going forward and skill sets we needed, I would think about the skills. And then we clearly had criteria about, what age they needed to be, what gender they needed to be, what types of skills they had. And so in that context, I would identify, okay, I want a person to do this. And so I'd start to talk to people that knew that field. So by way of example, Denise Morrison just joined my board. Denise ran Campbell's, okay, Campbell's. I talked to somebody that's very well known in the consumer products industry because healthcare is becoming more consumer oriented every day. So I wanted someone on my board that had good consumer experience. And so this person said, well, there's 3 people that I would recommend, and Denise was one of those people. So Denise and I started having conversations 3 or 4 years ago about what's going on with health tech and nutrition tech. She had invested in that, and it's part of our field. And then lo and behold, we developed a relationship. And then when she retired, I asked her, would you be interested to join the board? And we were through the process, and she just joined us. So the other side of that is I didn't use a search firm, so I saved $100,000, $200,000 on that. So it's kind of nice. And more importantly, you bring in people that you can work with, that are going to have the right skill set, that you've vetted because of relationships. And I've done that also for a few other members of the board. Yeah.
Fabulous. I think we're ready for Q&A. All right. Okay, here's a great one. So what were the key metrics that you used to judge whether you were making progress in Quest transformation?
Well,
OKRs.
So let me give you the harsh reality. Unfortunately, despite a lot of talk, still to this day, my biggest scorecard from investor is my stock price. Okay? Total shareholder return. Total shareholder return. Like it or not, okay, like it or not. Now, I'll tell you how it's changing, but the reality is total shareholder return. We get evaluated. You hear, pay for performance. Okay, it's in the proxy. We get evaluated by industry shareholder watchers. ISS is the biggest, and I will have a peer group of companies, and we would rack and stack their TSR, and I'd get compared, and I get placed in a grid that says Steve's TSR is at 50% and of the peer group, and his pay is at 50%. Okay, so therefore that's fair pay for fair output. Okay, so the first measure is shareholder value. Shareholder value, and there's a reason why activists get involved in companies. It's because they see there's an opportunity to create shareholder value. And to get activists no longer interested in a company, the best way to do that is to have a good share price, because there's no more money to be created, right? So building shareholder value is first. So making progress, laying out a strategy, saying that these are the 5 strategies you need to work on, and sharing in the marketplace realistic expectations that this would not happen, and with your board, not happen overnight, but step by step, making progress against that. And as people started to believe the strategy, believe that you're making progress, believed in the management team, share price would go up. Okay, so that's the first. The second is engagement with employees. Okay, so we do an engagement survey every year, as you would expect, and we get phenomenal participation. 50,000 people, get 90% of people participate.
Wow,
now, the majority of my workforce is also working third shift. We let up our labs at midnight. We result 95% next morning on 600 EMRs, electronic medical records, and 90% participation. And when I joined, it was in the low 70s, and that's pretty good. Low 70s is pretty good score for engagement scores. And you're making enough change in the first year or two when that goes down. I expected it to go down, as painful that is, but it went down. Why? They wanted me to make change, but I made a lot of change, and you're going to make mistakes. And unfortunately in this role, you're not running a popularity contest, and there's going to be effect. But equally, if you're making the right change and people see progress, and many of my employees own stock, and many of our employees see progress being made with what we're investing in the company and progress with making progress of bringing products to the marketplace, what we equally have seen is a rebound, and our engagement scores are much higher than when I started. It's about 75, 76%, which is really best in class. So the engagement scores, and then just so you know, we do think about other things as CEOs, but frankly, it's not in my scorecard. I think it will change over time, but equally making progress around sustainability goals, making progress around diversity, making progress around nutrition, making progress around the contribution we want to make in healthcare is quite important to the people that work in the organization, because that's what our goals are, have nothing to do with stock price. There's everything to everything else, because that's what people care about. How am I making a contribution to this world we live in? And so we are making a contribution. We can point to those things that we're changing that affects people's lives. And so that is the most important thing, but unfortunately, really as a CEO, it starts with TSR, but it is about employees feeling good about what they're doing and then also making a contribution to this world. Yeah.
And building on that, what's the communication like across the organization? Does everybody know what good looks like? I mean, is there a common language?
Yeah, we have we have a one-page strategy from day one. It's broadly deployed. It's on everyone's screensavers. It's on every wall. So if I go through any laboratory, we have a lot of different. We have 10,000 square feet. It all has to have what we're all about and what we're doing. We rebranded the company, so there's a consistent look and feel to the colors and shapes, and we're all part of the same family. So you get on board with what we're trying to accomplish, and that's really important. So people sense this esprit de corps and this momentum, and they want to be part of that movement. Yeah.
Question about sponsors and mentors.
Yeah.
And I would assume, it's very vague, but I would assume is it formal in your company? Is it more just organic in how the place is?
I would say it's both. It's both. Periodically, we'll pick individuals and say, you really should be working with person A, because that person A could be helpful to learning this skill set. We also will bring in external people, some coaches for people that have really specific needs. And then, for my career, most of my mentors have been informal. I find that's really helpful. I'm a big watcher. I'm a big student of behaviors, and I've picked people that I have watched and tried to emulate through my 40 years. And actually, I find it's equally important to watch people and learn from people outside of work. Because, work is just an extension of your life. So how you're successful in your life and how do you engage with people. Matter of fact, Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday, and my uncle just died. He's 101. 101. And he was a professional golfer. He was the oldest member of the PGA. Became a pro in 1939. Okay, so 80 years. And I tell you this because as soon as I could be strong enough to carry a bag, I was a caddy at his golf course. Yeah? And you learn a lot as a caddy. You learn a lot as a caddy.
You hear a lot.
You learn about who the jerks are. You learn about who the people that you want to be more like in your career. And so that was part of my lessons, and he was a role model for me. So I think in life's journey, those role models are very important. So I think a lot of that is informal.
Right. Great question. Can you talk a little bit more about how you navigated the change to your culture? That is always what seems to be the hardest to change.
Yeah, it is hard, and it's a journey. And I could say we've made progress, but we're not there yet. Let me tell you a funny story. When I came in, so as I said, I knocked on the door, and the new CEO. And it was a very traditional office building, which kind of gave me a message that something had to change. Very traditional. It wasn't a cool place. It was very traditional, right? And I go upstairs, and it's the 4th floor, and there's a real executive suite. And I'm not very familiar with that because I'm a technology guy, and we had cubicles and open offices, so I'm not familiar with, there's panels and big desk, and I had my own suite. And I'm like, really? I mean, this is so when I talked to my management team, initially, we'd have conversations about what needed to change and what needed to stay the same. And at the end, every one of them said, Steve, unlock the doors. I said, what do you mean unlock the doors? And I didn't realize, but when I walked in there, that suite, the executive suite, nobody can get into that area, including the members of management. My team couldn't even get in. They had to have special keypad access. And so they just wanted to tell me that was happening. So I said, of course we're going to lock the doors. So literally I got the rubber door stops and opened up the doors. And culturally it became big news. Okay, this new guy showed up and he's unlocked the doors. So unlocked the doors. But those small symbolic changes of transparency, which is one of the behaviors we want to work on. We also were very internally focused, spent a lot of time talking to each other about internal things. And I said, we got to be much more external. So I deliberately, and I enjoy it, spend 30% of my time talking to customers. And that's very visible. People know when I talk about our engagement with customers, what they want us to deliver to them. So those behaviors have to be initiated at the top and have to take time, but small incremental symbolic changes really do matter.
Great. I'm sort of building on that. With regard to the consumerism of health and health info trends, does Quest have a strategy for direct-to-consumer at-home testing?
Yeah, we do. It's a big area, so glad you asked the question. So we go on for a while here, but I won't. We have 5 strategies for growth. One is to be the most consumer products company on the planet. Okay, what's that mean and what we do? One is our experience. If you go into healthcare today, we would not find a consumer experience, okay? And so that's changed at Quest, and so you go to one of these patient service centers, PSCs, okay? Years ago, you see clipboards. Years ago, you see whiteboards, okay? Today, you see a kiosk, you see a cool display. By the way, we have a smart app called My Quest that you can schedule an appointment with. You can see wait times here in New York City. And also, we're now legally mandated that we have to share results. And it's building every month. So 7.5 million users on our smart app. And by the way, we're part of the Apple Health environment. So that's consumer. Yeah. Second is, it's all about people. So we really built a deliberate program. We call it Everyday Excellence. We're in the services business. So every touch with any customer, a physician or a patient, is quite important. We see 1 out of 2 adult Americans in 3 years. So we have a lot of volume, a lot of people all over the country. And then finally, to the question specifically, we've entered the direct-to-consumer space. We actually have brought to the market a product we call Quest Direct. And I'll give you a little bit of the background. You might be interested in this story. Remember this company called Theranos? Yeah, so it was right in our space. It was one of my top 5 questions. I know Elizabeth Holmes, okay? So she basically, created a concept that would disrupt our industry. So it was a big deal for us, right? And then we'll give you all the blow-by-blow detail of what happened. But one of the things, and I credit her because she did bring a lot of visibility to what we do and the importance of what we do. And then secondly, she worked in the state of Arizona to open up the possibility without a doctor's order you can get laboratory testing. And by coincidence, we have a joint venture in Arizona with Banner Health. And so they were in Walgreens stores with this direct-to-consumer. That is, if you want your cholesterol checked, your lipid panel, for $39.95, you can have it done. And if you want your glucose checked, because you lost some weight, going to see if you're making progress against your diabetic measurements, you can have it done. And I was a little hesitant because, with the Affordable Care Act, who's going to pay for this stuff? Why are people going to pay for it out of their own pocket? Lo and behold, I said, let's give it a try. We priced out 100 tests, we put up our shingle, and there was a market. People just did not want to deal with the headache of, going to their physician, they're on a statin, they wanted to see if it's still working, check your LDL levels, go into Quest, seamless. We resulted on your smart app. There's a market. So we then went to Missouri and to Colorado, and we just went countrywide. And this will build a platform for us, not just the basic testing, but also genetics as well. Oh, wow. So interesting enough, there's a company out in California that's got into the genetics consumer space called Color Genetics, which offers a very low price direct-to-consumer BRCA1 and BRCA2 test for breast cancer. Okay, very inexpensive, it's direct-to-consumer. Go online, but also go online to Quest, and we'll do it too. Because we offer that capability. So genetics, and we're also a partner of Ancestry. So we do that, that ethnicity testing, okay, to find out whether you're Polish, surprise, surprise, or if you're, some nationality you might not be aware of. But more importantly to us, Ruth, it was finding out or connecting with a consumer for them to realize the importance of knowing your family health history. As you work out your genealogy, you really need to know when you present yourself to a physician, what's happened to your family. And you say, oh, Dad died of a heart problem. Well, what was it? Most people that aren't in healthcare don't realize the big difference between sudden cardiac arrest and coronary artery disease, okay, or congestive heart failure, or they died of cancer. Well, what was the primary site? Those are really important pieces of knowledge. So we're building that out, and that relationship will continue. So the direct-to-consumer is an important part of our growth and an important part of where I see healthcare going.
All right, great. Okay, we have one more question, so
Sure.
I'm going to combine a couple so that people feel included here. Let's go back and talk about your leadership team. So 2 things. A 2-part question. Where did you get the philosophy, or where did you adopt the philosophy of your leadership always reflecting your employees, therefore the march towards getting enough women in management?
Yep.
And with that, to what extent do you feel that the culture that you created through this change created or destroyed value?
So first question, philosophy, goes back to a broader principle, not just around diversity, but to accomplish what we needed to accomplish, I needed the best team. And you limit yourself unless your net is as wide as it can be. So, in this marketplace, I was really limiting myself unless I broadened the aperture of where we'd get our talent. So to me, it's a little bit of a pragmatic approach that we need the best talent. Now, with all that said, it's the right thing to do, and it's the kind of organization I'd like to lead, and I think it's a healthy organization when you have diverse thoughts and backgrounds. I think you just get better answers, and I've lived in environments like that, and so I see the benefit of it all, but that's really the genesis of the notion. In terms of creating value, our TSR stacks up, total shareholder return, compared to our peer group, compared to the S&P 500, which is how you get evaluated over the last 7 years. It's beat those averages. We've done well. We've doubled the value of the company, which is an important measure for building value for shareholders. But equally, we've made a contribution. You know, our engagement scores are better. People feel good about the direction. People understand we're making a contribution to empowering better health with diagnostic insight. You think about the cool things I just talked about. Yeah, we're bringing genetics to consumers. We're bringing basic testing to consumers. We're bringing this test that was only available to a very select group of women, BRCA 1 and 2, by one company because there was a monopoly on it. Supreme Court changed that, opened up the marketplace. We invented our way in. And now it's a consumer test. And with an 87% accuracy, if you take the test, you can find out whether you have the mutation or not, which is important information for you to know. We equally are doing that with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's, with dementia. We were equally doing it around cancer, so a big portion of what we do is around precision medicine, ruling in and ruling out whether a product, a pharmaceutical product will work. So most of the drugs that are being developed today will require a companion diagnostic. And so we brought to the market a product with Memorial Sloan Kettering here in New York. We're the leading cancer centers with actually IBM Watson, okay, because we needed a cognitive computing partner all around precision medicine. And so making sure that you understand with 34 actionable genes what will work and what will not work. So when you think about what we have accomplished, yes, talk about stock price and talk about engagement of people, but the reason why those have done well is because we have a vision and we have an ambition and we're making a contribution. And when you have that, it all works together. And oh, by the way, you have a workforce that can deliver against it, and that's diverse.
That is great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. A phenomenal, amazing story. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ruth. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you.